We have Alfred Sahani Kadima. And that's basically the outlook of what we are looking out for the nominations today. We do know that we have Orange Democratic Movement having their nominations in several counties. We also have Wiper Wiper Movement having their nominations as well. And we are giving you a detailed account of what is happening. We're going to be crossing over to other reporters who are in different areas to just bring you that information. But now I'd like to also bring in Suba Churchill, a political analyst. And basically, Suba, welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Your comments so far on the nominations. We know what happened in Busia. We can see that today there seems to be a lot more calm and peace so far, although it's too early to tell. But your comments so far on the nominations?
I think it is a good effort that political parties are trying to put into practice some of the ideals that they espouse. And I think it is good that they are doing it internally without engaging the IBC, because part of the challenge we have had as a country is failure of political parties to grow. We have had parties mainly, beholden to the founders and not able to grow independent of those who finance them. And I think part of the beautiful things that we are seeing in these nominations is the manner in which parties are striving to put into practice some of those ideals that we fought for. And we are proud to see that, slightly different from what we saw in 2013, when parties were, not quite prepared for the nominations. This time around, they seem to be doing a little better. The parties seem to be a little bit firmer in terms of inter-party discipline, because we have seen parties summon and penalize some of the candidates that have engaged in violence. And I think it is a good practice that, if we continue doing this, including within, when conducting intra-party elections, I think parties will learn the ropes, and I think this is the way to go.
But Churchill, just to challenge that, just taking a look at the primaries that kicked off on Thursday last week, only very negative reactions coming in terms of lack of preparedness. And you say they look rather prepared. Others say they lack internal party democracy. You say parties are doing rather well in terms of that democracy. Political parties have usually been the first to point an accusing finger at IEBC for the things that IEBC is doing wrong. And now what we are seeing is that the political parties themselves are unable to do the things that they're pointing a finger at IEBC. Let's focus on Busia, for example, and talk about internal party discipline. We've just been speaking to Dr. Paul Otwoma there, and he says he will not take part in the repeat nominations because the party did not do what's right in terms of disciplining.
I think, when you listen to candidates, in any election process, elections are very competitive. So at times when you listen to candidates and take what one side says, without listening to the other, I think, with all fairness, I think what I'm saying essentially is that compared to 2013, I'm seeing a greater effort aimed at ensuring that the people's will prevails in terms of party nominations. Of course, you'd expect that there are challenges. Our parties have not had the time that, for example, parties in the United Kingdom, in the United States of America have had to grow and mature. We have had, we had, multi-party system reintroduced just the other day in '92. So we have not had, parties, growing and maturing. One of the challenges, again, we have had is that at every election, we seem to be having new parties as opposed to old parties. And I think ODM is one of the oldest parties today to speak of. Other than KANU, I think ODM ranks as one of the oldest parties that has maintained its identity and some of its democratic ideals. Of course, we agree that there will be challenges, and I think the party should be rehearsing. Other than waiting until the nomination day, the party should be rehearsing on how some of these things ought to be done, and I think they need to learn on their own how to conduct these affairs. But one beautiful thing that I've seen that is different from the previous nomination is the manner in which the party is ready to crack the whip on members and candidates that they think have gone overboard, including senior members. I saw the other day the Honorable James Orengo, the senator for Siaya County, being summoned. Such things were unheard of before because there were people who were perceived to be inseparable with the party. But this time around, I think the ODM election board is maturing up and is able to discipline or put to task any member that is perceived to have conducted himself in a manner that is likely to bring the party into disrepute.
There are those who feel that what the disciplinary committee within ODM is doing is not enough. Yes, people have been summoned, and yes, people have been fined, but the fines are within the confines of what politicians really can afford. And so it sets a very low bar in terms of I can take part in indiscipline because I can afford the consequences.
Of course, in any justice system, you do not fine people fines that you don't impose fines that people cannot afford. In any case, any punishment or penalty has to be commensurate with the mistake that has been made. But I think asking a candidate at this time to cough as much as 3 million is not a small amount. I think we must agree that such a thing has not been heard of. And I think for the party to have stuck on its guns and had said we want 1 million from this and that candidate, 2 million from this and that candidate, in some instances even 3 million, I think is not a very, very favorable penalty. So I think the party is trying to stick to its ground and ensure that there is sanity in all this nomination exercise. But as I've said, parties too cannot be forgiven for failing to grow, to put into practice some of these things. Had the party, for example, ODM, in my view, conducted its internal party elections in a free and fair manner, it would have provided a more learning experience that they would have relied upon on the basis of which they could have conducted better nominations.
All right. Now, Churchill, let's look at this word democracy, because I think it really is the focus of why we're having this nomination. Secondly, we have all political parties, both Jubilee and ODM and all the other smaller parties, also crying and saying that IEBC must deliver free, credible, and fair elections. But looking at the nominations, and maybe also to focus on Jubilee, because they're going to be having theirs on Friday, is it possible for us to really talk about democracy when at the party level that doesn't seem to be that democracy coming up? Because even if IEBC delivered a very free, credible, fair elections based on the people there, if at the primaries it was not democratic, then really that is not the wish of the people.
Exactly. You know, the constitutional threshold for free and fair elections are set out in Article 83, Article 86 of the Constitution, require that, even party primaries be done in a manner that conforms to that threshold. Unfortunately, our parties have not grown, as I've said. Part of it is because they lack the funding to be able to do that. But I think there is also lack of political will on the part of parties to let go. And I think parties are yet to learn that when we adopted the presidential system of government, MPs do no longer care whether their presidential candidate wins or not. And I think the moment the presidential candidates will learn to go it alone and realize that they are on their own without the support of the MPs, the better, so that they do not attempt to impose any candidates on the people. So I think by and large, the parties are struggling. It is a learning experience. You remember in the last elections we had TNA, we had URP. Today we have one, mega party that is struggling with all manner of candidates. Anytime I walk through the streets of the city and I watch at the posters of people running for ward representative for Nairobi Central, they are almost more than the voters. The candidates are more than the voters, and you're left wondering who will vote for them.
Yeah, because looking at Jubilee, I think Jubilee has just an excess of 8,000 total aspirants running for their seats, and out of those 8,000, 6,000 of them are actually MCA aspirants.
Exactly. And so you can imagine how overwhelming that can be, having to conduct nominations for such a number. And even if you distributed that evenly in Jubilee stronghold,
and maybe your thoughts on how it's going to play out on Friday, because Jubilee has all, the kind of politics we have in Kenya is one party is always, criticizing the other. And I'm sure Jubilee currently is criticizing ODM on the fact that, they've been shambolic, they've been described as disorganized. How is Jubilee going to pull it off, if at all they can, without chaos, given that they're going to do this countrywide in one day, or planning? I mean,
you saw the attempt by Jubilee to conduct party elections. It was chaotic. What we are going to see is going to be worse than that. You remember at some point they had to abandon the whole idea, And so Jubilee cannot afford even to criticize ODM. I can tell you that come Friday, in Jubilee strongholds, particularly in the Rift Valley and Central and parts of Nairobi, it is going to be chaotic because everybody knows what the price is. Everybody is struggling to be an MCA. They have seen how, the current MCAs have been able to engorge themselves on public resources. A number of them are imagining that they are going to do the same thing, forgetting that the public is steadily catching up with such wanton theft of public resources.
Right. I mean, and just considering that ODM finishes their nominations on Thursday, that's just 2 days away. What are we likely to see in terms of those who lost out on the nomination stage but still want to continue with their political ambitions?
I think there is a window for those who want to continue with their ambitions. As Dr. Tuoma has pointed out, there is a leeway for people to still run as independents. But by and large, the culture of running as an independent candidate is not so very strong. We had only a few members of parliament winning last time as independents, Honorable Musimba in one of the constituencies in Makueni, and I think in Cherangani, where the legendary sportsman, also won. But the culture is that our politics is still ethnic. And you look at the forming blocks of our political parties, they are formed largely on an ethnic basis, and therefore, those who are going to run as independents, particularly in areas where parties are very strong, like in Central, in Luo Nyanza, and in parts of the Rift Valley, I think those who are contemplating running as independents are not going to have it easy. So I think what I would advise candidates and parties to do is to adopt a conflict resolution approach in some of these issues and see where somebody fits best, particularly those who may have lost. If there's a way of making compromise, because compromise is part of democracy. People see democracy as I win or you lose. People must learn in any democratic process to lose. And I think this is one opportunity that political parties have not given candidates or aspirants trying to garner for various seats. People must learn to contest. People must learn to win. People must learn to lose. And people must also learn to compromise. I get concerned when I see certain political leaders. I remember the other day, the Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka was trying to show his hand as to who should be running for example, gubernatorial seat in Kitui. I've seen it also in ODM when the party seems to be suggesting that, the Honorable Ongoro should not run in Ruaraka constituency. I think as a party leader, party leaders should be seen as captains. And when you are a captain, you seem to know best who is the best player for which position. And I think that is part of the compromise that is still lacking our democratic process. As I've said, our democracy is still growing, very nascent, and it's in its growth, and therefore will take a lot of time to build. First of all, the party system needs to take root. We need to get more funding for our political parties so that they can mature. But I think there is also a way in which citizens themselves need to grow so that the parties can also have a chance to grow.
All right, and maybe now to just focus on something that is expected to happen today, and this is the retreat for the four principles. Your thoughts on the fact that, first of all, it was postponed, it was supposed to have started already, it didn't take off. What's the future of the NASA coalition in your, your political experience, looking at how things are playing out?
You see, I think they have taken it a bit too far. They are overstretching the patience of the membership and followers of NASA. I think time has come when the four gentlemen, unfortunately they are all gentlemen, we have no lady. Perhaps if there was a lady, perhaps by now they would have made a compromise. Yeah. But in all political deal-making, there will always be a dominant force, a dominant factor. I remember in 2002, when NAC was being formed, everybody else who came was being told, "You're welcome, but President Honorable Kibaki is the candidate." And it was very clear, and people would just dictate. And I think that is what is lacking in NASA, because there is no clear dominant force within NASA, even though, as people say, there is always one among equals. But I think that is what is lacking, and therefore everybody thinks that they stand a chance.
Is
But
it that there's no dominant force, or maybe there are 4 very strong forces, or 3 strong forces?
Oh, okay.
So it becomes difficult to settle on one.
In mathematics, they talk of permutations. In permutations, they say, 4 factorial 1 or 3, 4 factorial 3, 2, 1.
Correct.
And I think the arithmetic is that there are those within NASA who think that even though they may not be the strongest personality within NASA, they stand the best chance if only they get the support of ABCD. And I think part of the challenge that NASA is facing is the past betrayals. You remember people have said, Raila, yes, is a good person, but experience has shown that if you said Mudavadi Tosha, if you said Kalonzo Tosha, that is it. But he too has his experience. He did say Kibaki Tosha and see how he was treated. So people have those experiences, and I think when you talk to supporters of Raila, they say, yes, our man can say Kalonzo Tosha, can say Mudavadi Tosha, can say Wetangula Tosha, but his experience after saying Tosha has been the mistreatment that he had. And therefore, I think at some point they must make a compromise. And as I've said, compromises are part and parcel of any democratic process. People must be realistic and say, this is our best chance. Of course, you win
some and you lose some.
Yes, exactly. So people must say, we must adopt a win-win situation for all of them, because from the talk and what I've read in the newspapers, there seems to be something for almost all of them, and therefore people must learn to accept and move on.
Speaking of a win-win situation, on the dailies today is also the entrance of, or possible entrance of Bomet Governor Isaac Ruto. But let's focus on his political career himself. Is this a make-or-break deal for him, should he join NASA?
I've had the opportunity to work closely with Honorable Isaac Ruto, the current governor of Bomet County. When we left the Bomas constitutional talks, we formed Bomas Katiba Watch to propel the ideals that we had adopted at the Bomas talks and the Bomas draft constitution. You must admit that His Excellency Governor Ruto is a daredevil, whose gambles have always paid. Remember when he started holding on his own, drifting from URP, a lot of people thought, that his goose was cooked. But today, when you look at some of the crowds that Isaac Ruto has been able to pull, both in Bomet and the neighboring Transmara sub-county, you get the impression that he's a force to reckon with. And I think he has weighed his options. He knows he's standing on some fairly solid ground, and whatever decision he makes is likely to be for his benefit. Remember, when you look at his relationship with his namesake, William Ruto, I think there are no bridges anymore. They have all destroyed all the bridges. Both sides have worked towards demolishing as opposed to building bridges. And I think people in NASA, and particularly Raila Odinga, has really worked pretty hard to build bridges in that part of the Rift Valley. And why that is significant politically is that among the Kalenjin community, the Kipsigis, where Ruto comes from, is the majority in terms of numbers, because politics, again, about numbers. So getting NASA a bit of the Rift Valley pie would be a very good thing for NASA to reap from, and all that NASA needs is to get a chunk here, a chunk there, and basically try to boost their basket for the presidential vote.
Right. Yeah. Let's go back to the nominations. Of course, Jubilee starts theirs on Friday, and we're yet to see all the other parties conduct their nominations. But the more we see reports of shambolic nominations, the more Kenyans lose hope that their vote will actually count at the ballot. So at the end of these party nominations, the manner in which they have kicked off is not very promising to Kenyans right now. There's a lot of concern that this might lead to even higher, even graver voter apathy than was witnessed during the mass voter registration exercise. How do political parties or even political leaders begin to revive and convince voters that really their vote will count?
Of course, you're right that if parties do not conduct their primaries well, the cost can be high. And no one knows this better than the Honorable Raila Odinga. He knows that he lost as a party, several parliamentary seats in his strongholds. He lost Awendo parliamentary seat to Ford Kenya. He lost Kisumu Town West. Honorable Lego Aluoch was elected on a Ford Kenya ticket. He lost Muhoroni parliamentary seat. And therefore, these are prices that he had to pay in 2013 for conducting or being perceived to have conducted or presided over shambolic nominations. And Kenyans increasingly are becoming conscious that when you deny them a right to elect a leader of their choice at the local level, they have a way of punishing those that are perceived to have influenced those elections. And I think that is why this time around, the party seems to be very careful to be sure that as much as possible, the candidates that finally will bear the tickets of the parties that they'll be nominated on have the will of the people, the majority of the people. Of course, again, after nominations, parties must try to reconcile the various political parties. And one thing I liked about Dr. Tuoma when he spoke, even as you tried to push him to state what his stand is, he seemed to be very careful not to attribute the failings in Busia to the party or to the party leader. That means that there is room to compromise, and I think that is the spirit with which parties will be moving after the nominations. As you rightly say, Jubilee's nominations are going to be as chaotic, if not more chaotic, than the ODM ones, for the reason that Jubilee as a party is much bigger than ODM, and therefore the competition is stiff. I've already told you how, in Nairobi alone, watching some of the walls and trees, there's no space that has been spared. Every bridge has a poster. And when you look at the sheer number of candidates who want to be member of county assembly for Nairobi Central, you wonder whether there's any candidate left or everybody else is a candidate. Okay. And that therefore means that it's going to be very competitive. People will not care about the image of the party. And I think when you say that it does not inspire the voters are part of this. They are part of this ball game. They are enjoying it all. As Kenyans would say, it is their turn to eat because they never see these leaders once they're elected. And I think it is a culture we need to grow from, because people must learn that whatever you eat from a politician on the nomination day, on the actual voting day, is very minimal compared to the development agenda that these people should bring on board. Yeah, so I think it is upon the voters to learn gradually that all this euphoria and excitement during nomination times doesn't count for the development that they would wish to get from these political leaders. And you people in the media, also need to change the tone, because at times I see you profiling candidates and saying this or that candidate running for MP we will rely on his development record. MPs are not supposed to bring development. They are supposed to make policies. So the moment the media will help the public to focus on the roles exactly of each elected leader. I would not mind if you said a particular candidate for governorship will be relying on his development record, because they're supposed to do the actual development. Right. Okay. And when we attribute development records to people who are supposed to legislate, to provide oversight, then we become part of the confusion that the public is confronted with every time.
You talked about cultures, and maybe some of the cultures we need to move away from, but looking at a political class, when we're going into a competition, there's definitely going to be winners and there's going to be losers.
Yes.
But from the politics scene, we see like all are winners. Anybody who loses lost because of, or because the people running the elections were not fair, or because one of the political leaders who is influential did not mention their name. Will we ever be able to move away from that culture where we feel we lost only because it was unfair?
No, I think there are these bodies that political parties call election boards. And I think they need to be professional bodies. I get concerned when a member of the East African Legislative Assembly, I have a lot of respect for Honorable Pareno, but when you give such a position to somebody who owes her position to elected leaders, because as you know, members of EALA are themselves elected, voted in, nominated by parties and voted in by members of parliament, they too also have their own preferences.
And I believe
and I think that bring that up. Yes, and that is where the problem begins. Why can't political parties set up professional election bodies within themselves that can conduct elections professionally. When people discover that their names, for example, people going, I've seen people already queuing as early as 8 somewhere in Wundanyi, in Taita Taveta, that is a show of commitment, passion among the electorate. It would be disappointing if that electorate does not find his name on the voters' register. And so what we have seen in a number of nominations, including those that have been conducted in Busia by ODM, is where names of members, people who claim to be validly registered members of the party, are missing. When did the election body within ODM have a checklist? Do we have all people in the register? That can only be done by a professional body that runs the election within the party throughout the entire life of the party or for a given period of time. But when you give it to people who are themselves serving in Yala, at times meeting in Rwanda, at times in Burundi, they do not get sufficient time to provide the preparation required for those things. So I think political parties need to do a little more. The amount they are charging candidates is quite high, and they have to give people service that is commensurate with the amount that they charge.
Like bringing up the voters register, you would expect even for the case of ODM that they would have learned from the case of Busia and Bungoma, but we still saw that in the case of Kakamega. But even this morning, we were speaking to Francis Mtalaki, who is in Taita Taveta, and he tells us the same case was witnessed at the kickstart of the Wiper nominations in Taita Taveta as well. So parties seemingly not learning from each other. But let's focus on these challenges that have been witnessed in the nominations, and the voter register is one of them. Why is it such a big challenge? Jubilee says that we'll use both the party register and the IEBC register. Some say only one should be used. Why is it such a back and forth situation? It
is the rushed manner. It is the way in which our parties form a few months to the elections. I pity Jubilee because other than being the largest party, it is among also the youngest in terms of its formation. And therefore, when they are struggling even to form, it was 2 weeks ago when they were trying to nominate people into the election board. You do not expect such a board to do a good job because, one, they will have the struggle to compile a comprehensive voters register. They'll have to ensure, given the number of candidates, that all candidates are on the ballot paper. Remember, ODM had to postpone some nomination exercise, I think, in Malava, in Kakamega County, because a candidate's name, honestly, even if one can be forgiven for not having members in the voters register, but failing to have a candidate's name on the ballot paper is unforgivable. And I think these are some of the shortcomings that candidates are capitalizing on. Parties have given candidates excuses to explain why they should jump ship, to explain why they should reject results. And if parties did the good thing, the professional thing, by making sure that they have a purely professional election board within themselves, then some of these shortcomings would have been avoided. And therefore, candidates would have less reason to jump ship and dispute results. But as things stand, I understand where Dr. Tuoma is coming from. He has all the excuses. Certain people were allowed to vote because they were national ID holders as opposed to being bona fide party members. So anybody can use any excuse to dispute results. And that is a mistake that our parties need to learn from.
Okay. Do you think that party primaries, given that they seem a bit shifty, could affect voters for the general election? Could there be experience of more voter apathy, given that people feel not their person or the person who the people they wanted to be elected is in place?
Exactly. That has happened before. And I think if you look at the manner in which the last presidential vote was conducted, there were instances actually where there was vote apathy, particularly in CORD stronghold, because last time we had CORD and then the TNA and URP alliance. So it affects the presidential tally. There are people who will even turn up at the polling station on the actual election day, August 8th, and select which ballots they want to cast. Reason? They want to still punish those they think stood on their way between them and their preferred candidate. So these things have a bearing on the actual voter turnout. And the parties that will conduct and coalitions that will conduct their nominations